Hello and namaste to everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. So, welcome to On the Mic with Parth, a podcast where I'm bringing mountaineers and adventurers from all strata of life, listening to their stories, learning, and sharing with all of you. So, in this episode, I am speaking to Jill Wheatley, a mountaineer from Canada, who I personally look up to as a source of inspiration, as a source of not giving up no matter what life throws at you. Few years ago, she had a traumatic brain injury and she lost 70% of her eyesight. For most people, it would be the end of their life. Everything would be downhill from there. Despite losing 70% of her eyesight, not being able to open her left eye, she went about climbing 6 of the 8,000 meter mountains, and she is aiming to finish all the 14 8,000 meter mountains by the end of 2023. I'm in complete loss of words when I am trying to introduce this amazing being. She is a complete embodiment of what possibilities are all about. No matter what life throws at you, you can use those obstacles, those rocks which life has thrown on you, as a stepping stone towards something much greater for yourself and for others also. And that is what Jill is all about. So here is presenting the amazing conversation I had with Jill, and I urge all of you to listen to this conversation till the end. No matter if you climb mountains or don't climb mountains, everybody has a mountain in our life, and her approach, her mindset, her positivity is something every one of us can use to climb whatever mountains we have in our life. So, Jill Whitley, everybody.
Yeah, so I just thought that, recently I started speaking to people who are into my field, climbing mountains, and people sort of like what I do. So I thought, okay, let's continue this. Then I thought of you. You are someone I really look up to, and I really wish that your story reaches to a lot of people back home in India. In India right now, mountaineering and trekking is just starting off. So there are a lot of young people who have this energy, this dream, this goal, but have no idea how to do it. Somewhere our conversation, your journey, your experiences could help, who knows how it could help anybody. So
and that's how I feel, like just by being vulnerable and sharing my story. I really hope that others will find some light, and no matter what life throws at them, go about like embracing all that it is.
So we'll start. Hello and namaste, Jill. How are you?
Namaste. Dedi Dhanyavad. Ekdam Tiksha. I'm really good, thank you. Despite being in transition, really excited about the trail ahead. Definitely it's been an exciting trail behind, and I try to stay present, very mindful of where I'm at right now, and knowing this little transition, really it's pretty much 12 days of sort of sleeping in different places, different cities, hotels, family, before I get back home to Nepal. So just embracing the chaos right now, and super excited for what's coming up this year.
Awesome. And just, this one memory about when we met, I would like to share a little specific thing which I have in my mind, which I remember of you very clearly. So I met Jill, for the people who are listening, before my Annapurna expedition in 2021. I went to have a couple of beers in the Astrac climbing cafe gym, and I was sitting at a table where you were sitting, and we started talking. And this one thing I remember about you is your strong handshake. And that is something which is very rare, even in a man. Most people right now are like loose handshakes. Never trust a human being with a weak handshake. In some ways.
My dad would say something very similar.
Really? So that's the first memory I have of you. And then we started talking, and so that's how we connected. And in the next 1 or 2 years, you went about climbing 8,000 meter mountains, and I was watching your journey, and I was particularly inspired from your journey. And that is what I thought that, okay, let's speak about your journey. That's the whole idea why we are here. And I think a lot of people from India will benefit from what you have to say today. So what's going on in life right now?
Yeah, so like you said, so from the time we met in March 21, you were heading to Annapurna, and at that time I would have had no idea that where my trail would take me. I mean, that's the way life is. We just never know. And so at that time I was heading out to Mira Peak.
Right.
So Mira Peak is I can't even remember, 6'5" maybe 6'6".
Something.
And I was heading up by myself, just to get some altitude and to ski at that high altitude that I had never done before. So it was kind of a personal journey that actually led into lockdown, didn't it? Oh, no, that was the year before.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
Even in 2020, there was the first phase of lockdown.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I came back from Annapurna, we went to Annapurna, everything was okay. When we came back,
it exploded.
The whole world was in lockdown. We were not allowed to fly out.
That's right. Yes. And so what I ended up doing is I stayed up in Khumbu. So I summited Mira Peak. I skied, absolutely loved it. And then lockdown actually happened while I was there. So this was like lockdown version 2 or season 2. Yeah. And so I stayed in Khumbu. And it was just one of those really serendipitous opportunities, because I stayed with local friends. They opened up their door to me. Everybody, that was the season, everybody was coming down from Everest or being flown out. COVID was exploding at all these base camps. So since then, so I spent some time there. I think that's after Mira Peak had gone really well, decided that I was ready to try an 8,000. And it just made sense for me to try Manaslu, because back up a couple years, and I had actually run the Manaslu Trail Race, which is a state race around the 8th highest mountain in the world. And so to choose it for my first 8,000, it just kind of, I thought, oh, that's kind of an interesting story. I ran around it. Now I'll go up it. But also, no mountain, I mean, whether it's 8,000 or 7, doesn't matter. I mean, the weather, Mother Nature plays into it. So to ever call an 8,000 easy, I think is not really a fair description.
Yes.
But at that point, with my experience, because I'm not sure if how much time we'll have to go into, but I came into mountaineering very differently than most people, like really, really backwards. So I thought, like, with the it's not the most technical, and it would just be a really good place to start or to try, because at that point I shouldn't say start, because at that time I had no idea that I would ever even consider doing a second one. That happened. We made the true summit of Manaslu for the first time, being Majid at the new route. And I was part of that team, and it was standing on top of there was just strength I could have never imagined. I've been literally to the darkest space. Literally, like, my life was such that I was in such a dark crevasse. It's to one of the highest points in the world. And I started to descend, and I can tell you exactly where I was. We have a photo that actually it's a very clear reminder that I just thought there's got to be more to this, and I want to try something. I want to challenge myself, and I'm going to do all 14. And this was before like kind of the 8,000 explosion of the movie, the 14 peaks, and just a personal challenge. I really feel like life has prepared me for hard stuff. I've been through a lot, and that this would be something that perhaps I could, maybe others could see the power of possibility.
Yes.
And perspective, despite what life throws at me, because I'm doing all of this with 30% vision.
And that is what is something which inspires me and a lot of other people, because you use this 2 words. Your life was in a deep crevasse. So I want to go back a little bit in your life. And I want you to share what happened with you, because you were not born visually impaired. No. Something unfortunate happened in your life which you were able to convert into a very fortunate thing, as far as I can see. And that's the beauty of you. So what happened?
It's so complex. We could talk for days. But
we have all the time.
So basically, after college, I moved overseas working as an international teacher. So teaching actually sport. So the International Baccalaureate program is basically set up if you go to an international school in India, or if you go to an international school in Singapore, Russia, Germany, Switzerland, that there's a curriculum that's common. And so I was working at a school in Bavaria. So just you've been very close by, at least, France. Just imagine like Bavarian Alps,
Yes.
On a very typical Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, actually. And actually a day just like today, you can't see, but it's actually raining and really gray here where I am.
Like
and
France.
yeah. So the day was going just like any other. I lived on a farm in Bavaria by myself, single, with the typical Subaru, the 2 bikes on the roof, a mountain bike, road bike, my skis in the back, snowshoes. Basically, I could just get in the car. I could go, to work and then go to the mountains, or if it's a weekend, I could just choose what, based on weather, if I wanted to do some ski mountaineering, or I wanted to go snowshoeing or go biking in the snow. And so that was what life was. And at that time, I was actually extremely fit. I was preparing that weekend to go to Switzerland to compete in the World Duathlon Championship. So long distance cycling and skiing. And that Wednesday, when the weather was not so good, my colleagues, so other physical education teachers, sport teachers, were decided to bring their students, their classes inside. Instead of using the track or the basketball court outside, they brought them inside just because the weather wasn't too favorable. But my character is such that, like, we just put on that's what good gear is for. We put on our raincoats, a little wind jacket perhaps, and get outside and, embrace that fresh air. If we're not at risk, then let's get out there. And that's what we did. The day kind of got stormy, but not in the literal sense. Just every student, so these are 10th graders, so about 16, 17-year-olds, they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. And in my lesson plan, I would not go back and change anything. It was complete fluke. That where a boy was standing, sort of the equivalent, if you know baseball, at home plate, and I was standing sort of at the equivalent of third base with another group of students, a ball got hit, actually, for Indian reference, like cricket, but with a baseball bat and a ball. And it actually hit me, they think now, about 80 to 90 kilometers an hour to the side of the head. So I never had a chance, like I didn't see it coming. All I knew is immediately something was extremely wrong. And my eye closed and actually blew up the size of a baseball and started to immediately change color, like somewhere between your shirt and my shirt, like the reddish, blackish, purple. And I was taken to hospital, but I passed the coherence test. So when you have a head injury, there's common questions. Where are you? What day is it? What's your name? I apparently did well enough. I passed, and they sent me home. So my 2 colleagues drove me back to the farm where I lived, cows underneath, up in the loft of the barn. I was in and out of consciousness for the next basically 2 days, a day and a half from the time I actually got there. In and out of my own vomit, really, really sick. I knew something was wrong, but at the same time, I was countering that with the fact that I'm a PE teacher. I just teach sport to teenagers, and I coach them and love to play outside. I'm not a medical doctor who works in an emergency room. So who am I to doubt this diagnosis? And, part of me, the voices were saying, toughen up, Wheatley. You're going to race this weekend because you've been training for it. You can do this with a black eye. You could run, you can ride a bike. It's impermanent. It's going to change. Just so my friend all along was planning to come from the UK. He was going to drive me to the race in Switzerland, but instead he drove me back to that hospital once he found me, and they put me in an ambulance basically and rushed me to a neurotrauma hospital, where the next 4 months were very intensive care. And that black eye was in fact a fractured skull and a bleeding and swelling brain that has left me with only 30% vision. So my eye has never, in fact, reopened. The traumatic brain injury has impacted me in ways that no one could really ever imagine. So that was the beginning of 26 months in 7 different hospitals in 3 countries. So because of the complications with my traumatic brain injury, which included the vision, but also there's so much complexity with the brain. There's the neuro part, like the brain itself, physical, but then, there's cognition. So, things like understanding and memory and listening, and then there's like the emotional, the psychological, the physical, so the eye, but then also everything, because I couldn't see properly, I was trying to use my head because I just could see out of the bottom of my left eye.
Wow.
And so everything got out of line. So, from my head all the way down, if your neck's out of line, because I'm trying to see, my head's out of line, my neck's out of line, your back's out of line, it affects your knees. So there was months and months of therapy. And with that, like the areas of the brain, like I mentioned, was included the area responsible for appetite and nutrition, was not being had. I physically could not eat. And so I really went from being extremely fit to they said if I wasn't hooked up to these machines and the medical the feeding tubes and medicine that was being put into me through my nose, through my stomach, that I wouldn't survive 3 days. And when at first they thought when the blood clears from the bleeding brain that things would open up, and basically my eye would I would start to get control again. I would be able to move it, to open it. And it just kept getting pushed. Brain injuries are so complex. At that time, you couldn't tell me that. I was angry. They would say, oh, maybe 2 more weeks, and it just kept getting pushed. And with every push of those goalposts, my hope just deteriorated. Like I grew darker and darker, like we said earlier, like falling deeper and deeper into that crevasse where at the 6-month mark, they said, no, you're not going to get your vision back. And it's kind of twofold there, because part of me was like, okay, at least I know now, I'm not going to hold on to any hope that it's going to get better. But then there was the reality of trying to accept it's not going to get better. And I'm not going to be able, the big red X, I remember it like it was yesterday, this doctor putting a big red X on this document that referred to my the ability or privilege to drive. And, the lifestyle that I was leading at that time was very much, that little SUV getting me around to do things in the mountains. I couldn't drive. I couldn't ski. I couldn't ride a bike. So all of these losses, I lost 70% of my vision, but all of the things that I lost because of that, the independence and the autonomy was just crushing, to the point where I didn't think life was worth fighting for. Like I didn't want those 3 days that they said, the machines were keeping me alive. They were helping me survive, and without them I wouldn't. Yeah, things got extremely dark, and I could not see that life was worth living at that time. But because of the complexities, I was moved between these different healthcare centers, neuro rehab hospitals, just learning all kinds of things again, working through, I was doing a puzzle recently with a friend, and I just, at that point, like I was doing puzzles to try, to get the, rehabilitating, and they were like for 3-year-olds, and I literally, like, I would just lose it. I just had no time for the fact that, a week earlier I could have done it with my eye closed. But these were just ways, like I would have to learn to tolerate the headaches. If I do work on this puzzle for 2 minutes, the headaches start, and just trying to slowly progress back to a point where I could live independently. But with all of that, more than 2 years in these different specialized hospitals and across 3 countries before I was finally released into a world that I didn't know, a world with a visual impairment. I couldn't live in Germany anymore because my work permit was taken away, because I couldn't do the job, which meant I didn't have residency because that was dependent on my employer. So it was just loss and loss and loss. And I went, I was literally dropped off at the airport by an Uber. And there was this relief because I had spent so much of that time one-to-one. Like a nurse's assistant would have to be within 1 meter of me, like for many, many months, where I could not do anything without a person right there. I could not go to I couldn't walk. I couldn't go to the toilet. I couldn't wash or have a shower for months, so part of me was relieved to get out of that all the hospitals and that care. But then I just felt so lost. Like I couldn't live where I was living before. I can't drive. I'm Canadian, a citizen, but I haven't lived here in so long. I'm not a resident. So I literally had no base, like nothing. And it's very, I guess there's an assumption, you're married, or you have kids, you have a support system. The life I was leading, no, I didn't. So things were really complicated. And the only sign really for me, I just thought kind of pointed towards mountains. And I would try to figure out life's trail, figure out what to do next with some time with Mother Nature. And so I planned 13 different massifs around the world where I would walk and hike and maybe get back to running and just hope that, Mother Nature would help me figure out life. And that started in 2017, and that 1 year continues today. So the 1 year in different massifs, it led through Nepal, like that was part of my original 13, and just really fell in love with the Himalayas. So a friend convinced me to do a running race. It's called the Annapurna 100.
Right.
This is 10 months out of hospital, and I had, not a chance. I was just trying to kind of humor him, like, okay, I'll sign up. But knowing that, I'm not going to go to the start line, but I did. And then, starting in the dark. So my vision is such that the darkness does not help. Knowing that the sun was coming up. So the race might have started at like 4 a.m., knowing the sun was coming. Anyway, I just found strength that I'm not exactly sure where it came from, though I do know that the lessons from my traumatic brain injury and what I've been through has prepared me for hard stuff. I really like climbing. Like the uphill, there was about 5,000 meters gain in that race. And it just went kind of fairy tale like 10 months out of hospital in Colorado, and now I'm running a race in the Himalayas, and I ended up on the podium and with Mira Ray, like Nepal's top runner. I mean, she was way ahead of me and she was coming back from injury, but just the fact that I actually got myself to the finish line and felt strong was really fairy tale. And I think it might have triggered something like, I'm going to get this figured out. At the time, I don't know if it did, but I met the race director, and he was curious about, what's going on? What are you doing? And he's like, we have this race around Manaslu, a stage race coming up. And I didn't even know what Manaslu was. No idea. And I'm like, sorry, I've got this ticket. I'm traveling around the world in mountains, blah, blah, blah. So thanks. That's very kind. But anyway, I went to bed that night in Pokhara, and I thought, Jill, yes, of course you do. So I texted him and said, I'm in. Changed that ticket to New Zealand, ran around Manaslu in I think it was about 10 days, like a stage race. That's where I really fell in love with the Himalayas. So before the race, I had run the Annapurna circuit, spent some time in that area around Pokhara. Really not much time in Kathmandu at all, because I was really there. I just wanted to run and be in nature.
Right.
But getting out into Manaslu, I just felt it was different than Annapurna, that area, a little bit more remote. It's changed in the last few years, absolutely. I knew at that time I wanted to come back to Nepal. Just the simplicity of life, what I had been looking for in terms of mountains, being away from society. I chose, I really crave that serenity. That's why I choose mountains. I choose to be away from what society tells us we should be doing, or we should be looking like, we should be doing this, should be doing that. And I just prefer life in the mountains, the simplicity. And I just feel so much more at ease. At first I really struggled with the fact that I look different than society tells us we should. My eye is permanently closed. I'm hiding with sunglasses. It's still a work in progress, obviously. I think just being in the Himalayas really helps me keep things in perspective. So I continued to travel that 1 year, and then I came back to Nepal. And then I started going higher. I I didn't run. I trekked the 3 passes.
Yeah.
Because, side note, I had got pneumonia. I couldn't run, so I decided just to go
Oh.
slow.
Oh.
I decided to go slow and just walk it, like no watch. But again, serendipity, it turns out, going slow, because I had just come out of hospital with pneumonia, I started talking to people. I wasn't looking at the watch. I saw the most beautiful mountain in the world, like Amadablam. It was like, I had no idea such existed. And just getting over those 3 passes and still feeling incredibly strong, intrigued by the altitude, and having conversations with climbers who live, with Everest in their backyard.
Yeah.
Or Amadablam. Like, I stayed in Pangboche for a couple nights, got to know some
Yes.
locals there. Then I thought, you know what, I want to try this. I want to try going a little bit higher. And so one thing led to another, and Island Peak and Labuche happened. Like, I did Island Peak and then came down, like, from the summit to Pangboche the same day. And my friend and I'm like, what do we have to do to climb Labuche? And he just makes a call to get the permit. And we went back up like 2 days later and Labuche. Yeah. So, those were, I dare I say the word easy, but a good start point for somebody who is coming in like with a running background, not a mountaineering background at all. So I'm, those are ones where I'm kind of learning. Like, they're teaching me stuff, around the village. Like in Pangboche, we're out doing some rope work and rescue work, not intense like courses. So I've kind of come into it backwards, and I'm right now talking to you after having done even more courses. Like, I'm working in Canmore in Canada, getting training that transfers. But yeah, anyway, so just there's no normal storyline. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just
Absolutely.
been,
Absolutely. And I'm a little lost of words right now listening to so forgive me if my thoughts are not in a proper line right now. But when I was listening to you, I just feel that people, if they get, small problems like a breakup, or if they get fired from a job, they feel that their life is finished. They really behave like that. They act like that.
absolutely.
Like, emotionally, they really believe it that the life is over if they break up or if something bad happens. And when I look at you, something which, personally, I don't know if I should be saying this, but this one fear I have in my heart is to lose my eyes. Personally, in my own experience, at least, I believe out of the 5 senses that we have,
Yeah.
the vision, eye, is 60% prominent. The way you perceive the world, the way you experience the world is more than 50% visual. Smell, taste, and touch, all those things are there, but minimal. So this is one fear which I really have in my heart about eye.
I
And to
respect
know somebody who has gone through it and come out of it so beautifully. I want to take you back a little bit.
Sure.
During those hospital days, it makes me a little curious, because I'm thinking, if something like this had happened to me, and if my future was completely in the metaphorical dark, how would I think? So when you were in the recovery phase, when you had literally no idea how your eye will recover or how your future looks like, so what were the thoughts on a day-to-day basis? Because when times are tough, time goes very slow. Time
Yes.
goes very
Very
slow.
slow.
So every day in the hospital, not knowing, how was that like?
There was a lot of anger, aggression. Like, I look back like a light on the ceiling, looking down at it, almost like truly in disbelief. Like, that was me. It really feels like a number of these recollections are scenes from movies where I can see myself like shouting, swearing at the doctors. A place so dark that I didn't want life to continue, and they were keeping me alive. I had what's called a court order, where the authorities are in charge. Like, I cannot deny medicine. I can't deny
God.
like the medical treatments, because I was in such a state. But just coming back a little bit, one of your first comments, with respect to my story and how I feel, you mentioned relationships, or problems at work, people going through COVID, or I mean, we're all in the pandemic still
Right.
working through the pandemic, through these different times of darkness where, it's not going to be traumatic brain injury. It's not going to necessarily be vision loss or an eating disorder or any of these or what has come in the wake, or the avalanche that has come in the wake of my traumatic brain injury. But every human, like, you can connect to tough times, whether it be, like you said, relationships or work or family issues, job issues. Every human has their own mountains, their own darkness. And so that's why I chose to be vulnerable and to share. Like, I think the brain injury has after some time given me courage and helped me shift my perspective to the point where if I share, like I'm doing with you today, that I can help other people. Because at the beginning, that darkness, and I'm connecting this back to what you said about, if you lose your vision, that seeing the world is, just not seeing the world is not seeing the world. And I just feel like there's such a sense of shame. And I say shame, and what I mean with that is, that powerful or intense feeling where I'm not worthy enough. Like, I felt for so long, and I'm not going to lie, I still struggle with it. I look different. I'm so messed up because of my brain injury. I had at first, all the cognition stuff. Like, I couldn't write properly. I was writing letters backwards. I couldn't remember. Like, I'd ask you the same question over and over. So the cognitive stuff, the physical, the cognitive, I just felt like I have so many flaws, like, my eye, but then there's scars on my wrist. There's scars from the tubes going into me. There's scars on my knees from falling because I can't see properly. So there's so much shame in my scars, that I just want to hide. But with time and working towards acceptance, recognizing the power of vulnerability by being vulnerable and sharing, because every human, like I said, doesn't have these complications that I've had, but we all have. And I think mental health is a huge thing that's not talked about enough. So I hope that by talking about it more and being real, not just the sunny summits on Instagram, but talking about the real shit, it's the real stuff, and going through like,
it's okay.
And that's why at the beginning, I was reluctant to use social media because I just feel, but then when I, again, about perspective, choosing to use it in a way that I hope other people can connect to the reality. Oh, here I am ice climbing with my lack of vision, but I'm having a really hard day, or, I'm struggling with my workout, or my eating disorder is messed up, but talking to those things, not just boom, here's a sunny summit on Kachinjunga, making sure they get the backstory, and at least, putting in the captions, like, to describe that, we got lost on Kachinjunga. Actually, it took us 2 attempts, but we got there. Like, just, that's a mountain analogy, but just in general, like in everyday life, like this morning, I had a terrible workout. I'm in a hotel, and the gym didn't have what I wanted. And I was like, I tried this and I tried that. It's just like acceptance, impermanence. These are all lessons from my traumatic brain injury as well. Like, just tapping into, it's part of it all. Like, not every day is going to be, the perfect workout or the perfect summit. But talking about that, and people connect. I feel that people really connect to authenticity, and that's what I really try with my social media. My website is keeping it real.
Absolutely. I always say this one thing: if you speak from your heart, it reaches to another person's heart.
Oh, love it. Yes.
Only heart to heart. Boom. I've been following you on your Instagram and on your Facebook and everywhere. And the project that you are into, call it Mountains of My Mind. And
my website, what Mountains of My Mind, my project, Vision 8000. Yeah.
Vision 8000. Exactly.
Yeah.
So 70% of your eye vision was unfortunately lost. But as you very rightly said, that we don't really see the world. So I would like to, understand that 70% physical world was taken away in some way. But the deeper world of the mind and the spirit, in your experience, how would you describe what is that world like? What did you perceive beyond physical when this journey started in a way?
Like 3 things just triggered there that you said. One, I really appreciate you checking out my website. Yeah, Mountains of My Mind. And that was long before I came up with that name, long before I started climbing. It was basically a year into traveling, and there's just so much in my mind, like working towards the acceptance. And that name, actually a friend suggested it. It was like, yes, Mountains of My Mind. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, actually, another journalist asked me yesterday about that. And that's the first time I thought, no, it wasn't, I was well, like a year or more before I even started like going over 5,000 meters. Anyway, so I think the next thing that you mentioned just about the losses and 70% lost, and sort of the tagline ish that I started with was, lost sight, but gaining vision. Like,
Right.
And I think so much, so much, or so many lessons. I think this is where kind of you were going, the lessons from my traumatic brain injury and what it's taught me, that, not focusing on the losses, but what I have in fact gained. And some of the key lessons, and it's really helped me tune into, I think even more in the last couple of years, my values, like sticking to my personal values and what is my mission and my vision. Do you know what I mean? Like, what do I stand for? And am I sticking to that in my choices? Like, climbing, and what are the reasons, the whys? Why am I climbing? And why do I do
Why
this?
do you climb? What is the why?
Well, for me, I think I alluded to it earlier, really. The initial was to be away, like the serenity that I feel, and the serenity that I crave, I only find in mountains. It's where I truly feel at ease. And, it provides, I mean, it's kind of cliche, but in terms of perspective,
Yeah, of course.
yes, when I have a few photos in my mind or experiences in my mind where, we are so tiny in this big world. And when you see my summit photo, or actually a climb on Amadablam, there's a really cool photo where it just, the Himalayas as far as you can see, or in the Karakoram on K2 as far as you can see, and I'm tiny. And you could say, oh yeah, you hear that all of the time with respect to perspective. But I think, yes, climbing mountains, there's so much, so the serenity, but also how small I am in terms of that, but also, with that, in terms of, how small my problems really are. And I think every human can relate to that. But at the same time, I'm able to flip that. And I think that is something that I feel is truly powerful, in which I can do, is, though I'm so small, I've gained so much from my traumatic brain injury that it's taught strength that I didn't know I have. I find that strength in the mountains, and I'm also able to see that how small I am, I can make an impact as big as those Himalayas, as big as the Karakoram. My impact, though I'm not a classroom teacher anymore, I can help others by climbing in these mountains. Others are going to witness the power of perspective and possibility. And I don't climb I legitimately don't climb for other people. Like, I'm not saying it's a selfish thing, but I love and appreciate that others can see what I'm doing and choose how to respond. I've chosen how to respond to my traumatic brain injury. My TBI, my vision loss, my eating disorder, all of the cognitive change, the PTSD, that was not a choice. Life happened. I didn't get to choose that. But now I get to choose my response.
Absolutely.
I'm choosing to embrace the eyesight that I still have. I'm choosing to embrace the life I nearly lost. And I'm choosing to do that in mountains.
Wow.
All of these, I have 30% vision. I'm climbing the biggest mountains in the world. I can make, a Himalayan-sized impact for others by doing this.
Absolutely. And you said this one thing, that in one way we are very small, but the impact we can have is so big. And I always think of this one thing, that a human being from one perspective is so fragile that even if a small stone hits the head, he can die. But on the other end, from another perspective, we are able to climb where no life, not even a bacteria, survives. That is the power and vulnerability of a human being, that human beings can go to space but can die if, a stone hits their head. And
Right?
that's the beauty of human beings, that, we can
Yeah.
be on the extreme ends of the spectrum. Where you want to be, it's
Mm.
absolutely your choice and the way you respond to the situations. And I
Yes.
think this key word, response, and
Mhm.
not react. Responding to a situation is the key to turning your life around. Not a lot of people are able to understand the depth of this, because whenever something negative happens in their life, they just react to it, and then everything is downhill when you react. But when you
I agree.
respond, that's the first step towards climbing into you in some ways. And
Yeah, taking that time, that
hmm,
happens, pause,
yeah,
choose the response, rather than what you said
absolutely.
to react. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of people who follow me, they are into proper climbing mountains. So,
Yeah.
the question that they have a lot is about training.
Yeah.
How do people like you and me who climb 8,000-meter mountains train?
Yeah.
So I would like to specifically know that, you climbed 8,000ers in a span of almost 1 year.
Yeah.
2021
Less
was
than
the
1 year.
first one. Less than 1 year, exactly. So why I'm asking this specifically is that I climbed Everest, for example.
Yeah.
And after climbing that mountain, I was exhausted and tired and done.
Yeah.
And then to be able to go to another, then to another, then to another, then to another, that requires a different level of preparation
It
in
does.
terms of
I
physical
agree.
and mental. So
Mhm.
what does your training routine look like? If you have to explain a week in your life when you are training, how does it look like?
Okay. Well, the last year, I mean, there legitimately was not a lot of training from the time that I
Okay.
started on Dullaguri in March
Hmm.
until the time I left Nanga Parbat September 1st. So in there, it was back to back to back to back to back. But a typical, like where I'm just coming from right like today, a typical week for training for my 8,000ers, training for the mountains is being in the mountains. So I've just spent from October until last week, training in the Canadian Rockies. And what a lot of that actually included was training specifically, actually being taught, like working on skill development with respect to ice
Hmm.
climbing. Though at 8,000 meters, we're very rarely actually climbing blue ice.
Yeah.
Those skills, the rope skills and the technical systems that I'm working on and the technique are all such that they're going to help, they're going to transfer over. They're not going to hurt when I'm climbing 8,000 meters. So the last 3 months, basically, I have been either ice climbing, ski mountaineering, every day, and then with an alternate, like an off day would be a gym and run session usually, or
Okay.
one or the other. Like something lighter, but generally you know training for the mountains, I'm in the mountains. So
In the
like from
mountains.
the time I met you, going up, knowing I wanted to start going higher, I took my skis. I felt comfortable enough. I'm living based out of Nepal now. I know how things work. I could go to Mira Peak, climb it alone, ski it alone. And so, yeah, lockdown happens. Okay, I'm going to, stay in Kumbu as long as I can and train and run out there. My goal was to leave the Rockies, actually lead climbing, and I was able to do that. So
Wow.
I'm the first one to make jokes like I'm leading, I'm setting up the ropes, putting in the ice screws, setting up the anchor for other people to follow. I'm the visually impaired one, but they're going to climb after me. I think it's pretty funny.
Beautiful.
But it's a very good sign of progress.
Yes.
Also, the fact that I can make jokes. Yeah, so for those looking to get into mountaineering, I wouldn't suggest starting the way that I did. I hope you don't. But working on these skills, like the rope skills and systems. And for me, I absolutely love ice climbing. Ski mountaineering is something that I never imagined. I never thought I would ski again.
Yeah.
Because I have no depth perception. So basically, to measure depth, so length, width, the three dimensions, you need two eyes to work together to measure that distance. And because I only have vision coming out of the bottom of my left eye, I don't have depth perception. I've had to adjust. I still fall, especially on the downhill, but not as much as I used to. I use different cues like colors, shapes, light. But with that, I'm not sure how those of you that are skiers out there, like the ski touring going uphill, not a problem. But my fear, the stories my mind was telling me, was that going downhill, I'm going to miss a pocket, sometimes the gray light, and, I'm going to get caught out. So for those first few years, still, there's no chance I'm going to ski again.
Wow.
But it happened. The first thing was to ski with the friend that I used to ski tour with, because he had previously been a ski guide. He wasn't guiding me at the time. We were just friends skiing, and watching him, he knew my ability, and trusting that, if there was something, I would see I could see his movement, or he would stop and say, like, go over there instead of here, kind of thing. So anyway, so this season I was able to do, despite climate change and the snow conditions in the Canadian Rockies, I was able to get some skiing in. So those long days, like, so skiing uphill for hours to ski down and then do a couple laps, at altitude, and adding water or bottles to my pack.
Right.
So a heavy pack when I'm ski touring for training. And then, so ski touring and ice climbing were the main. We had a spell where there was, like, in the -30s to -40s, even -50 with the wind chill. So I had about a week where there's a climbing gym. I tried to work a little bit indoor where they have a self belay, so I could do some quick climbs and then go and do some strength work. They have the machine that's not a Stairmaster, but where the stairs come out at you with a heavy pack on, working on that. So mixing things up. But what I would say is do as much as you can in the mountains if you want to climb mountains.
Do you have a mentor who has helped you accelerate your growth in some ways?
No, I wouldn't say I have one particular mentor. There's been some people that have made a huge impact on me, even though, well, for one, I've been out of touch for a long time. Two, they passed away, or three, just life happens. So for example, Eric Weinmeier is the first completely blind person to ever climb Everest.
Yes.
And I had never heard of his story until, a few years ago, where somebody mentioned, oh, you must know Eric. Actually, no, I don't, because I didn't want to hear other people's stories. I wanted nothing. Like, I was just so angry at everything. But then, once that change, that shift in perspective, and I was able to connect with Eric and so inspired. But that was also another, a trigger of gratitude. Like, I am so thankful that I have, and he had, he spent his early days with vision as well, but that I still have 30%. Like, I don't need somebody hanging on to me and I chose to leave hospital without a white, the white cane that is often used for visually impaired, because that's what they wanted me to leave hospital with. Anyway, so Eric is I wouldn't say he's a mentor, but very inspirational for me. I had a ski coach when I was very young whose work ethic was just extremely strong. And I think he taught me a lot of lessons, not black and white, but just with respect to hard work. And, you're the first one at training, or you're running before training even starts. You're the last one off the hill. And Brian, he still has, like, I still think of him often, and then, very similar, my dad who passed away last year when I was climbing, actually, his work ethic and his support is always there with me, and I think I climb stronger and feel closer to him in since he's passed away in the mountains. But then, like, right now, that I would say, like, I had a pretty strong mentor in Canmore in Alberta, where I was climbing. I had the opportunity to climb with Sean Isaac, who is an alpine rock and ice guide there, former very competitive, like, world-class mixed climbing ice climber. And he, when we first met and I told him what I wanted with respect to climbing, he really kind of embraced the opportunity to work with me and help me progress, specifically this season, with respect to my movement skills, my confidence on the ice, to a point where I left lead climbing. So those people are huge. There's a lot of people that play key roles. Of
course. I don't know about the western side of the world, but in India and also in Nepal, getting the money to climb 8,000-meter mountains, it's a bigger mountain than actually climbing the mountain. So,
1,000%. Yes.
so
That's the hardest part. That's the hardest part.
I'm sure everybody wants to know, where did you get the money from?
I didn't.
You
I have
didn't?
not got the money, to be honest. I'm very much in debt.
Uh-huh.
I'm very thankful for an expedition leader who has been generous in terms of time and trust. He completely believes in me and my story, and that eventually I will be able to get him paid back. But to be honest, when I am not training or climbing, I am working on things like writing and communication, like trying to keep my website up, keep people informed about my project. But then working towards sponsorship, like the hundreds of connections that I have tried to make, literally hundreds. And banging at the door and banging at the door again and again. And it is definitely a mountain in itself. I've had the very very kind support of a few companies who have given me glasses and goggles. So Julbo has helped with respect to my eyewear, protecting the vision that I do have. I'm so thankful for that. Hyperlight has given me some incredible packs for climbing and skiing and ice climbing. Himalayan has provided down suit and some Gore-Tex and gear. Lakey has provided gloves and poles. However, there's been actually zero cash sponsorship at all. A GoFundMe was set up by my sister last year. I mean, I understand people don't have a lot of money, but unfortunately that, it hasn't gone super great. And I do find it very difficult to ask, like to put that out there. Hey, can you help out with this? There's so many places, that people in need, and that's hard. It's hard to ask. With respect to companies, I really do feel that once I get to the right person, and sharing my story, that is the most impactful. However, getting to that right person is extremely difficult. Those people, the decision makers, the people responsible for sponsorship, partnership, finances, are hard to connect with. And there are a lot of inspiring stories. I do feel that my story is quite a bit different. I'm not into this for setting records. I have zero interest in the fact that I'm the first to do this and the first to that, because that's not the reason I climb. And I that's something I struggle with. I understand that some companies actually like those numbers and like the fact that I am setting records besides the fact that I'm visually impaired. Coming out of out of Canada with first this and first that, and that has nothing to do with my vision. But I do feel like companies, like if I'm representing them, I do have a story to offer. And
of course,
and with respect to, it's very much more than carrying a flag and holding it atop the 14 highest points in the world. Like, I enjoy conversation and meeting with people and sharing how I went, like we talked earlier, how I moved from such a place in that dark crevasse to the highest points of the world. And I feel like, whether it be a company or an organization, by sharing my story, I can help add light to their community, their team, their workers, their audience. But actually getting to the right person to hear my story and to share that is proven to be a very difficult mountain.
I would have imagined that the story and the journey that you have, it might have attracted some sponsors. So is the GoFundMe link still active for your upcoming project?
It is. So my project called Vision 8000, on my website, there is a section called Vision 8000. And then there's like the timeline, the story, like I have a video of sort of how I got to be where I am. And then there's a page that talks about becoming part of the supporting cast.
Okay.
And it has ways, it has the link to GoFundMe. It has, it shares what can I do to help you, your organization, your team. Ways to specifically, if someone was to be intrigued to sponsor just like one entire expedition or the whole project, I have all kinds of options and ideas there, and I'm more than willing to talk more about it. But yes, the GoFundMe link is in the Vision 8000 page.
I have some people in my mind who I would like to speak to. I have not gotten sponsors also, but the few people who, so first of all, I'm also under a lot of loans, so I understand that. My life is completely bound by paying off loans right now, and that's why I don't even have the freedom to even dream of climbing a next mountain until the loans are paid off. That's my priority. But the sponsors that I've gotten so far, they have come like a blessing in disguise. For example, when I was on my way to Kathmandu to climb Annapurna in 2021, I had only 50% of the money. I had to pay at least 70-80% to the organizer. And I had told him, don't worry, I will come to Kathmandu and pay you. I had no idea how. See, I'm like this. See, I'm like this. I shoot first, I aim later. It's stupid, but it works. So what happened is in the flight, there was a person sitting next to me. It was a early morning flight, 5 a.m. I was in my earphones were in my ears and I was sleeping. And he woke me up. He saw my, what do you call this? Ring. Ring, yeah. So it is of a spiritual guru in India. He recognized it. And he's like, do you follow this guru? I'm like, yes. And I again put the earphone and slept. He woke me up again. Then we started talking, and then I told him I'm on my way to Annapurna expedition. And then we got more into it, and I'm like, yeah, it's difficult to raise money and this and that. I'm still 50% less. He's like, you are on your way to the expedition and you are worrying about something as small as money? I'm like, yes. He's like, you don't worry, I will sponsor the rest of your expedition. I'm like, sir, you don't even know my name. Like, I don't need to know your name. I can see it in your eyes that you are not lying to me. And I can see something in your eyes. And believe it or not, the minute we landed, he called his manager. And by the time I exited the airport, the money was in my account. And
Unbelievable.
And I have met a few. Yeah, and I've met few such people who just come in my life as a blessing, you know. So I will speak to them about you and I will show them this interview and I hope something comes out. And one thing which comes in my mind is the expedition leader you mentioned who had this faith in you. Would you like to name him? Who is he? And I mean, he is the real, you know, believer in you and he made you climb these mountains. And I mean, it's so beautiful. Who is he?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say he made me, but after he saw with my Manaslu expedition and he saw the strength with which I climbed, he suggested and we sat down with a calendar and Mingma Ji and I planned out the next 13 peaks over the 2 years.
Amazing, amazing. Amazing. I mean, these are the kind of people that, you know, the world needs, you know, that if somebody has the talent, if somebody has the fire, you should give that energy, the fire, a direction. Money and everything will come. It will follow. It's okay.
I truly believe it will. But to be honest, like when we talk about being vulnerable, being authentic, like some days it's hard. Like, I see, you know, some people getting sponsorship and the stories. It's hard. It's disheartening at times, but I really do believe that it all will work out. Life just has a funny way of doing so sometimes.
Absolutely. And now you had, you know, somebody to climb with. And then how were the actual expeditions like? So the first one you climbed was Manaslu. So when you were climbing 8,000-meter mountains with 30% eyesight, I'm pretty sure it's not an easy thing. So how did you manage actual climbing and how was your experience on these 8,000ers?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't climb before I lost my vision. So, you know, I don't really have a reference point there. This is all I know. You know, this is what I see. And so I would say that the mountains of my mind are toughest on the downhill. And that is because of the lack of depth perception, but also this sort of ingrained perhaps toughness on myself. You know, I always want to be, and of course on the mountains, we want to be quick, we want to be efficient. I'm not as quick or as efficient going downhill. You know, there is this because I don't see properly, you know, whether it be like the steps in the snow or just not so stable, you know, I'm a little bit more cautious with my feet. I would like to think when I'm going uphill, people may not even notice that I actually am so significantly visually impaired. On the downhill, you know, I want to get down, I want to move efficiently, and we're tired, right? You're on the descent, you know, our bodies have been through a lot, and I just need to, it's a lot of brain power for me to actually put one foot in front of the other at that altitude. So yeah, in terms of specific climbing, I alluded to earlier with respect to the eyesight that I do have, and using things like shapes and colors, watching somebody's feet in front of me or their body movement. I try to use different tools than the average person or average climber would. Absolutely. But yeah, it's the mountains of my mind that I really need to deal with, and being just, you know what, you're a little bit slower, you're still safe, you're healthy enough to be out here. Like, speed records, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
Like, sorry, with all respect to those people who are into that, I'm not. Like, the fact that I'm healthy enough to be climbing, you know, I'm healthy enough to have made this choice. You know, my life I didn't choose to stay in the darkness. I chose to find something that truly inspires me, you know, that truly finds me in a place of serenity and of that which I crave. You know, I'm choosing that. So I hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. Which was the most difficult mountain for you so far?
Just the ones up here. But literally, it's really hard to say, you know, because it's a question I get asked often, but I always struggle with it because there has never once been a point where I thought this is too difficult.
Okay.
Want to turn back, never. And I really do think that it's because the way that I've learned from my brain injury, embracing impermanence, like this storm is gonna pass. Yes, it's hard, it's tough right now, it's cold, but it's not going to last forever. You know, those long days in hospital, I didn't think they were ever going to end. But the fact that, you know, the only constant is change, is really something that has surfaced because of the brain injury. So the toughness, you know, in storms, or, you know, the headaches or just lethargy, like just being tired, it's going to pass. What's interesting that I think many people knew or not maybe too into the mountaineering scene is the weight. And I really struggle. So I had aimed to climb 7 last year, 7 this year, but because of the weather and conditions on Nanga Parbat, we never got a chance to summit.
Right.
And I'm so thankful that we all walked out alive. Nobody got hurt. But we were within minutes of disaster.
Yeah.
And those more than 2 weeks sitting at Nanga Parbat base camp were extremely tough. Just the waiting, the anticipation. And for me, I need that movement. Like, the physical outlet for me is such a huge part of my mental health. Like, I know if you know, to balance these mountains of my mind, I need to move my body in some way every day. And if I don't, like, to try to take a rest day, it is hard for me. Yeah. So I need that. And the situation at Nanga Parbat with monsoon coming early, the storms, the avalanches, sitting at base camp was extremely hard. I mean, I think listeners are probably a bit intrigued, like physically. I had Dalagari was a little bit hard mentally. I had skipped a camp. My guide had thought it was a good idea. Some downtime waiting at base camp, longer than I expected. Again, no movement. That was a little bit of a challenge, which mentally was hard because Manaslu had, my first 8,000 there was so strong, and then Dalagari I didn't feel quite as strong, and there was a lot going on in my mind.
All right.
But then Kachinjunga, I really liked Kachinjunga. You know, the have you done it? Not yet.
No, not yet. No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
You know, the base camp, it's very different. And yeah, just a little bit more interesting climb. And then, you know, we got up over the 8,000 mark and things got a little bit confusing, but
I know.
Yeah. Oh, Kemal probably shared.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
yeah, but I really feel like I actually thrive in situations where there's some pressure. I think it brings me to a good place. And again, I can tap into that. Like, okay, we're a bit off course, we're a bit off track. We might have to go back down, but never was there a doubt that we're gonna get this. Like, so I mean, you can read more about the Kanchenjunga expedition I wrote about it on my website, but knowing that we had to go down, there was never a doubt that I was going to summit. It was just, it wasn't going to happen today, but we will
Yeah.
get it. So that was the top of Kanchenjunga, a little bit in the rappelling. I had a different guide with my lack of vision, sometimes rappelling in places where I guess it's kind of hard to describe. If you're in sort of a narrow space trying to rappel, and I'm not sure if I'm trying to direct a rope a certain way, and there can be communication issues.
Yeah.
But generally, yeah, I really do feel that the strength from my traumatic brain injury has taught me about what I'm capable of, and that's why I do that's why I am so what I feel strong in the mountains, because of those experiences, those tough times.
Awesome. A lot of people, like not a lot of, like every mountaineer in India has this dream of climbing K2, which we can never climb as far as we can see. So
Yeah.
how was your experience on K2?
My experience on K2, I still pinch myself, like especially summit day, like just feeling so incredibly strong. I mean, the hardest part for me with K2, the hardest part for me that is going to be on Everest is the crowd. Like this
Right.
year, so K2 set more than like the record number of climbers on K2 this
Yes,
year.
yes, yes.
But I was able to stand on the summit with Pemba for a couple of minutes before anybody else was there. Just the timing.
Wow.
Um, it was yeah, it was absolutely incredible. And on summit day, I just felt so thankful and so strong. And I still think about back to July 22nd, 22 at 7:22 a.m. like and as far as I could see, like absolutely stunning serenity. And just, those are the times where standing on K2, like I didn't get through, through the house chimney, the Black Pyramid. I didn't do that myself. It was all those doctors and nurses and
Wow.
sort of like nurses assistants, therapists who didn't give up on me when I gave up on myself. They're the reason I got through those. Like I was ready to die, to like leave me in that crevasse. I didn't want to see another day. They didn't give up. And so they're the reason I have got to the top of K2. So when I'm standing on any peak, that's what I'm thankful for. That's what K2 feels like to me, just full of
Wow.
gratitude. Getting
Beautiful.
down, yeah. And then yeah, for me, a lot of especially the non-mountaineers, like getting down it's not easy. You're only halfway there, as they say, which is true. But then with my vision, it's a little bit more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but K2 was an incredible experience that I am absolutely so full of gratitude for. So thankful.
The first ever mountaineering video which I ever saw in my life as a child was of K2. I remember it so clearly in my mind. I had promised myself that this nonsense is something I will never do. This is stupid. It's so steep, it's so
Life
cold, I will
changes.
never do it. And see, here I am climbing mountains.
Yeah. Yeah. Impermanence.
Exactly. End this interview on a lighter note. I have
Sure.
a rapid fire.
Okay.
So it should be rapid and fiery. Which is your favorite food?
Does coffee count?
Coffee counts.
Coffee.
Coffee. And out of the 8,000ers that you have climbed, which has been the favorite if you have to pick one?
Ooh. Favorite? Let's
I
say
know
K2.
K2. Uh-huh. Okay.
They're all different. I say
I know, of
K2
course.
because of when I think of how strong I felt on such
Exactly.
yeah, with considering its reputation. But yeah.
If you have one, which is your favorite movie?
Since my brain injury, or even before, I don't sit still very well. It's very rare that I could
All
actually
right.
watch a movie, but I will say The Alpinist.
The Alpinist. Ah, it's one
Yes.
of my favorite also. I actually saw this movie on Manaslu this year when I was
Oh,
on the
cool.
base camp. And when things were upside down on the mountain, That's when I actually, in the avalanche that happened, we lost a Sherpa from our team. So after that, we decided to abort the expedition. And it was during this time when I watched this movie, and it had a different kind of impact.
Yeah. There's a lot of respect there for Marc
Yes,
Andre.
yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry about Manaslu this year. Side note. Yeah.
So if money or scientific logic was not a boundary, which is that one crazy dream which you would want to do? For example, I have this dream of climbing the highest mountain on Mars.
I
It's
don't have that.
so if there were no limits, what is your ideal dream?
Not to sound like super like fluffy, but I really aim to stay mindful, like just present. And right now I'm totally focused on this project. And I would be extremely grateful if I can complete my project Vision 8000, climbing all the 14 peaks, knowing that other people perhaps maybe shifted their perspective with respect to what visually impaired looks like and what they consider as possible.
Awesome. It's much better than climbing the highest mountain of Mars. I mean,
Maybe more realistic.
yeah, more realistic, and your next step
Never
should be
know.
your ultimate goal. That's all. That's it. If you give your 100% to the next step, it will happen in the best way. Which is your favorite vacation destination?
Ooh, vacation. I mean, I prefer being in the mountains. I
Mountains.
absolutely, no one could convince me that there was anything better than Nepal. I've been based there pretty much the last 4 years. However, Pakistan is pretty special.
Mm-hmm.
I really, the Karakoram, I think the remoteness makes it makes it different. I've traveled, from before my accident to now over about 65 countries. But I really prefer the serenity of being in the Himalayas and the Karakoram. I'll pass on the beach, thanks. I like your shirt. That is a beach on your shirt, right?
It is like, yeah, I got this from Maldives. It is a beach.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's as closest to the beach as I need to be.
So actually, for the first time in my life, just a few months ago, I went to Maldives for
I
first.
remember.
Yeah,
Did you
exactly.
get did you get engaged there or something like that around that
No,
time?
I got engaged in France in 2021. Maldives was just a few months before. This was my first ever beach vacation.
Okay.
And so beaches are nice, they are relaxing. It has a whole different aspect to it. I will be a mountain person also. Before
I
before experiencing the beach, the ocean, I always had this question in my mind, that what if the oceans are also, something for me? But when I went there, I did scuba diving, I did all of it. They are nice, it's all beautiful. I will like to do it again, but mountains is something I will always go back to. I understand. So if there is one mountaineer who has inspired you the most, who is that mountaineer?
The mountaineer, well, I think it probably comes back to Eric Weinmeier originally.
Right.
That was sort of my introduction to what a visually impaired person is capable of, for sure. Very inspired by Mingma Ji and what he does and what he believes in that I can do on the mountain too. So that's inspiring for sure too.
Awesome. I met him many times actually, even on Manaslu. His camp was right above our camp. What do you think of what Nimstai did?
Um, he's a very strong climber.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
great. It's yeah.
Awesome.
It has absolutely nothing to do with my project. Like I said before, that was part of
Yes.
but yeah, just humans are incredible.
And if you have one, for the lack of a better word, advice or a tip to the young people who are coming up who want to be in the mountains, what
Yeah.
would you say to them?
Just stay open-minded like I think coming back to perspective and possibility. Just because something doesn't seem right or you can't imagine such and such happening, nothing stays the same forever, and keeping that the awareness of, really, as cliche as it sounds, like anything is possible. And with respect to impermanence, everything is constantly changing. So your situation right now, don't get stuck on the word plan. Like, I plan to climb Everest, I plan to climb Manaslu, but the blueprint, I use the word blueprint because it's flexible. We can use an eraser, because life doesn't always go the way we plan. Suddenly you get hit in the head with a baseball and everything is completely changed. So just be open to that impermanence and embrace what it is. Like, so now I have this blueprint, these ideas to climb these mountains, while at the same time being very realistic of possibilities. And so
possibilities is a very exciting word.
And just like, coming back to that, like, the stories our minds tell us, like, a lot of people tend to get focused on, well, what if, but what if we counter that, shift our perspective? Like, what if it goes right? What if it goes better than you expected? Exactly. Like the Annapurna 100 I ran, or the time I climbed Manaslu, like, so much stronger, so much better than the stories my mind was telling me. So we choose our response. I think that would sort of be the one thing. Remember, like, when life gets hard, when adversity strikes, you're in a dark space, we choose how to respond.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you giving me your time from this busy transition phase of your life. I hope to catch up with you in Nepal. I am also coming in Nepal in the springtime to lead a few groups. So if it matches somehow, we will try to catch up in Kathmandu. I really wish you all the best. And I know the remaining 8, you will be able to do it. I can see it. I can see it happening. Thank you so much for proving it to the world.
High five to that.
High five to that.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share and hopefully add some light to your community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Okay.
Soon.
Daddy, Danwad.
Okay.